Good evening, everyone. Thank you for your patience. We call this meeting to order, our last meeting of this calendar year. Ms. Henry, could you call the roll?
Ms. Hubbard. Ms. Hogan. Ms. Sonier. Ms. Val.
Here.
Ms. Jones.
Here.
Ms. Cousins.
Yes.
Mr. Davis.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Could you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Tonight, we celebrate our spirit of excellence, spotlighting the first LEGO League Challenge participants and coaches. On Saturday, December 10th, St. Louis Public Schools elementary students participated in the first LEGO League Challenge qualifier event, which took place at Gateway STEM High School. The Hodgen Inventors won the Top Champions Award, and Betty Wheeler CJA was the second place Champions Award winner. Both of these teams will now move on to the regionals in January. A special thank you to the coaches and to the robotics teams at Gateway STEM and CSMB, who were instrumental in running the tournament, along with many of the First Missouri volunteers. Congratulations to these students and teachers. Dr. Adams. Apologize. We are going to go out of order and take public comment at this time prior to the presentations and the vote. First person on who signed up is Mr. Byron Clements. And just a reminder, comments are 3 minutes. Press the button.
First of all, I want to take the opportunity to thank Dr. Adams for his service, working with him through the years with the union. We appreciate you. Next, these are my comments, these are Ray Cummings' comments. I'm just reading his statement. At this particular time, it makes sense for the St. Louis Public Schools Board of Education to become the charter sponsor for the Confluence Academy schools for several reasons. One, it will prevent chaos in our community. We do have some experience with what happens when a charter school abruptly loses its sponsor. Each time a charter school sponsorship has been lost and are closed, it has occurred and caused a disruption in the community. Parents and kids are left scrambling for a new school. Other schools have to accommodate an influx of newly enrolled students. In this case, 2,400 kids, hundreds of teachers and staff potentially displaced, and thousands of families being affected. On the other hand, an orderly transition occurred when SLPS worked with Imagine Schools after they lost their sponsorship without any major disruption to parents, students, and qualified educators who were transitioned to new positions. Two, the Board of Education can either take charge now and sponsor these schools or pay a seriously high financial, social, and educational price later on. Make no mistake about it, the school privatizers stand ready to carve up Confluence Academy and disperse the more than 2,000 students like a Christmas goose. Privatizers will do what they do, and if allowed, they will come in, and what the public will hear is a giant sucking sound as the schools implode with all the available resources being bled out. Whatever is left after the privatizers are finished will be dumped on the SLPS doorstep, shipwrecked and bankrupt, leaving SLPS with the bill to clean up the financial mess. Three, this will be just one part of a process of fully returning local control of public education to the elected Board of Education, which is the governmental body responsible constitutionally for educating children in the city of St. Louis. For nearly a quarter of a century, others have usurped the will of the city of St. Louis voters. These others have opened and closed schools in a willy-nilly fashion without the consent of the voters' duly elected body, and the BOE is ultimately responsible for that. We all know who the others are, and they are universities who may or may not have any relationship with the St. Louis community, or they may be doing a quid pro quo for some millionaires like Rex Singfeld, who pays into their endowment. Next thing, they sponsor a charter school associated with the privatizers. By far the worst among them all, in opening charter schools willy-nilly with no accountability, is the Missouri Charter School Commission. Given that the population is only decreasing with enrollments in all schools in the city, it does not make sense to be opening new schools, eating up precious education resources and useless administrative costs. The BOE becoming the sponsor of Confluence Academies at this time will ensure the orderly process for over 2,000 students and families, saving precious education finances from the hands of vulture-like, greedy, and ruthless privatizers, and continue the process of returning local control to the BOE. Thank you.
Thank you. Bill Monroe.
Good evening. I wasn't going to mention Imagine till he brought it up. Imagine was put out of this city by a mayor for the way they handled the business of public education. And when Imagine was put out, of course, I was a founder of the first Black charter school here at Thurgood Marshall. And then there was Ethel Hesman Lyle. And then Imagine was put out for being dishonest and just ruthless. So I want to say that, and I'm glad you mentioned Imagine. But I'm here, each one of you, I sent an email out today, this afternoon, to all the board members. And I want to know, are you in receipt of it? This email came from Harriet Tubman Preparatory High School and Career Center. And this is the project to save some vacant school buildings. The crumbling Stowe Elementary, the crumbling Banneker is one of the sites that Harriet Tubman has selected in conjunction with Saving Beaumont. And Harriet Tubman proposes a female dorm to occupy the Banneker site and a male dorm to occupy Stowe Elementary there on the corner of Goodfellow and Lotus. It's every day my heart breaks when I see the tragedy of especially our young Black boys who are in the streets, who are dying, who are carjacking, and they need to be in schools, and they need to be in schools that care for them. So we propose this, and can I ask a question of the board? Did anybody get this email from me with 19 pages of this proposal regarding Harriet Tubman Preparatory High School and Career Center? Did anybody get it? I emailed you around 12 noon. Matt, you got it? Okay. And I'm surprised that some of you didn't. And I asked this board to consider this collaboration with Harriet Tubman Preparatory High School and Career Center, a community school, not a charter school, all right? Not a charter school. And I'm a little surprised at seeing the headlines today when I saw that the Board of Education is thinking about getting with the charter schools. It's dangerous. And the community has no say. And I'd like an answer from somebody as to why you didn't get these emails. Emily, did you get the email? But Matt, you got it. Were you the distributor?
As a reminder, we don't respond to the public during comments. It's just, we just listen.
Yeah, and that's 3 minutes, Mr. Monroe. We'll follow up.
I'm sorry?
We'll follow up with you.
You know what I'm asking for, right?
Yes, your 3 minutes are up.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Julius B. Anthony. I'm president and founder of St. Louis Black Authors of Children's Literature and the Believe Project. And I have with me Mr. Jim Triplett, who is the principal at Frable Literacy Academy. On Tuesday, December 6th, we were thrilled to open the first Believe Literacy Lab at Frable in St. Louis Public School. And we're here tonight to say thank you to the St. Louis Public School Board on behalf of the Board of St. Louis Black Authors of Children's Literature. We're thrilled to support you in your work to ensure that all the children in St. Louis Public School District are literate and successful readers, particularly by the end of third grade. And so we like to present to you this framed copy of the digital announcement for that opening that happened on December 6th. And that's why we're here tonight, basically to say thank you. We're happy to be, as a graduate of St. Louis Public Schools. It was a historic day for me, and just want to say thank you. And we appreciate your yes and allowing us to be a part of the St. Louis Public School system. Thank you, Dr. Adams, and thank you, Mr. Matt Davis.
Mr. Murphy.
Good evening, everyone. When I was standing out waiting for the meeting to start, I noticed people had signs, public was coming in, they were getting excited about being able to be here tonight. And all of a sudden, all these restrictions start coming out, no signs, no cameras, et cetera, et cetera. I think we kind of stuck in that pandemic mode, you know what I'm saying? I remember, and I kind of said, oh yeah, it makes sense during the pandemic, but democracy always got to make sense. And people have to feel wanted, you know, people have to feel welcome to this discussion down here. You know, I'm talking to my students all the time now about participating in government. You know, I'm talking to my students about how so many revolutions around the world started with young people being tired of being mistreated. And I want to invite them down here, all right, to hear and participate in what's going on down here. So some of all these old undemocratic things need to disappear. And that's connected to another thing. You know, we talk about trauma. Is that quick? Anyway, I get extra. Anyway, what I really want to say, when it comes to trauma, and our students are traumatized, you know, and everybody say all students can learn, but our students can't learn unless they have the support that it takes to be a learner and all of those type of things. And so we have to be proactive about trauma. We have to start having events that help them get comfortable with uncomfortable situations. They have to start learning about peaceful, fair, conflict resolution methods that are regardless of rank, because people are always trying to power over each other. And that leads to this other thing, like Nana has said, our students are suicidal with all these guns and so forth. I had some students visit me and they wrote a song, an awesome song about the bag. And I said, hey, what the heck are y'all doing? I see y'all YouTube and y'all got all these AR-15s and all this stuff. They said, well, we got this from the older generation, from the old heads. I said, there might be a lot of truth in that, but it's got to stop somewhere. And I'm expecting y'all to go on and help stop this. And one other thing, I don't see why the students from Confluence just can't start enrolling in SLPS, you know, and we just got it on over here. Now, I'm speaking, that's me talking. I'm not speaking as a union member tonight and so forth. So I don't think y'all should vote on it tonight. That's all I got to say. Appreciate you.
Johnny Williams.
Hi. I'm Gianni Williams. I'm a parent of 3 children in the SLPS. I'm here out of concern for the 14 years under supervision of Dr. Adams, and where 80% of our students in 2021 are not on grade level. I know that if only 20% of my job was fulfilled, I wouldn't have one. With that, my hope is that the newly elected superintendent will see these numbers and take on the challenge, see the potential in the children and educators, and build an effective action plan to secure results. Additionally, I went to the citywide planning meeting on September 28th. I was extremely disappointed because again, there was nothing implemented on how they were going to execute a plan on making a better SLPS, as they mentioned. So we want the next superintendent to see parents, hear parents, partner with parents. We believe the next leader must be a visionary with a love for the people they serve, someone who is authentic, transparent, and who has had success in an urban school district. The next leader must believe in our children's brilliance and do everything in his or her power to support our children to meet their greatest potential. Thank you for listening.
Julia Ikeren Coder. Was I close? Thank you.
Thank you for your time this evening. I come with peace, love, and joy, all those good vibrations. I am a powerful parent with Bridge to Hope. I'm a mother of 9, and yes, I birthed them all. This is my first time. I'm very excited, everyone. I believe in you all, and I hope you believe in our children too, our future. I have great hopes. I would like to say that on behalf of parents of City of St. Louis and children, that we have been impacted by the devastating low scores, navigating through their schools, and they're trying to learn despite of the barriers. This is a crisis, and we as parents, we want to be involved. We don't want to sit back and say, they don't need our help. We want to be a part and take our rightful place as parents with the process to ensure that our children will be safe and learn and thrive. We stand up and we want to fight for what we believe in. We don't want to throw sticks and stones. We know that don't get us anywhere. We are here to uplift one another. And so with our children succeeding, failure is not an option. And so I know that St. Louis Public Schools, the board is responsible for hiring superintendents. I didn't know that at first, but I've learned that with Bridge to Hope. So I'm counting on you today to listen and to hear your community. And we really, want you to embody our hearts. We want the next superintendent to see parents, hear parents, and partner with parents. We believe in the next leader to be a visionary with love for the people and serve the people. And so some who is authentic and transparent and who has success in this school district. The next leader must believe in the brilliance of our children and do everything in his and her power to support the children and their need and meet their needs. Thank you so much for your time.
Ms. Funches.
Hello. Oh, is it on? Okay. Hi. Happy holidays. Recently, I've started the process of the middle school transition situation, and it's really a bad situation, guys. It is so much work to try to figure out what middle school your kid can go to, having to apply, waiting for an app, some sort of reply from the schools, getting these little short emails. It's very disheartening. You would think that everybody's parent, all the parents want their kids to go to like gifted schools or magnet schools. What we really want to do is just go to our neighborhood school. We just want the kids to stay together. Every conversation that I'm having with parents from my school, Mason, is, oh, where are your kids going? How can we keep the kids together? How could they stay with their friends? All of them have applied to so many different places. Middle school should not be a place to apply. It's very hard. You can imagine that if you moved into the city, you would have a really hard time navigating where to send your kid. The only thing that I have noticed is that everybody wants to send their kid to McKinley. That's really unfair. It's unfair to McKinley because it makes it seem like they're extraordinary and the rest of the schools don't have the resources. I also took a tour of Long because that is the feeder school for my school. It's also my neighborhood school. I'll be honest, when you go to eat, you eat with your eyes first, and the school leaves you hungry. It feels like there's no resources there, and this isn't coming from them. This is just me walking an empty campus at the end of the school day. The truth is the teachers that were there with the students working with them were really wonderful people. They spoke very well of the children. They didn't speak about any misbehavior. They just spoke about being a family and all the programs that they're trying to get going. But you could see how much resources they need. And that's just a neighborhood school. I just want to send my kid to a neighborhood school. So if you could maybe work out something better where I don't have to go online and apply and my kids can stay with their friends from one school to the next. It's not fair to keep moving them around to get them good resources. That's all. Thank you.
Mr. Jackson. David Jackson.
Good evening, Dr. Adams and board. As a former Board of Education member, I've spoken to the board 3 times since I stepped down. I had to come tonight to ask the board members to really consider in voting on sponsoring Confluence Academies. Confluence Academies has not achieved AYP since its existence. And they've been around for 15 years. Not one time has this organization come to the Board of Education for assistance, for help. And I, for one, thought the school should have closed years ago because they have failed our kids, just like other charter schools have failed our kids. And we, as the Board of Education, have to accept any and all children, including those that leave closed charter schools. The thing that I get upset is these charter schools close and the money that this board gives them every year, which is to the tune of over $70 million, leaves with those closed schools. But we have to take care of those children that has been left behind with what we have in place. And Dr. Adams, I've got to say, I appreciate the effort that you did in achieving that. What scares the heck out of me and my family is I know that we're going to be provisionally accredited in 2024 when the scores are released from DESE. And I want you to consider that before you vote, or if you vote on joining Confluence Academy. Because the same thing that the state did in Normandy and Wellston, why would you merge a failed school system with another failed school system and expect a positive result? It does not work. It does not work. It is extremely important that whatever data that you have to make a decision on Confluence Academies, that you study that data before you actually take the vote. Study the data. Thank you.
Mr. Chester Asher.
Good evening. SLPS, please forgive me, those board members who are new to this process, but the St. Louis Public Schools Board does not care about Black children. It cannot care about Black children. For how many years, forget COVID, how many years have the majority of kids who go to school every day failed in your schools? How many decades? The gentleman said one failed school district cannot save another. It's common sense. This school board that serves majority Black kids, Black and Latino kids, but majority Black kids, is racist, because in no other circumstance would you allow for decades kids to go on failing. What is the outcome of, I think this district has a 14% proficiency rate for ELA. That means 86% of the kids can't read. What type of jobs are they gonna get? What are they gonna do? When I spoke to the foreign police chief, he said the #1 reason for the violence in this city is poverty-induced violence. Poverty. Are you gonna get a job when the majority of y'all can't read? What type of economic prospects do you have? And for this school board to have no plan, there is no plan. For decades you failed. And each and every day you wake up, you come here and you have the nerve and the audacity to look us in our face with no plan. I, a Black man, say, you know what, I'm gonna put together a plan of my own. I'm gonna start my own charter school. I got SLU to sponsor my school. Someone from this board called SLU and said, don't sponsor Ali Academy because it's an affront to SLPS. You don't want to educate Black kids, and you have so much hate that you're gonna stop another Black man from helping his own Black kids. This is the depth of your racism. People ask, what does racism look like in 2022? It's not, it's not the 60s anymore. It's not the 30s anymore. This is what racism looks like. You allow Black kids, you push them into violence and crime and poverty. We are the murder capital of the entire nation. Are you kidding me? Why? Look at our goddamn school system.
Neville's McNeil.
Congratulate Dr. Jones and Emily Hubbard. I did work for you, but today I'm representing. Oh, thank you. Okay, congratulations to Donna Jones and to Emily Hubbard. I did work for you at the Union Hall. I'm a member of 420, but tonight I'm representing the Missouri Retired Teachers Association. Missouri Retired Teachers Association, we are against all charter schools. We're not against the school, we're against the funding from public school money. So what's happening is the money is being taken, the taxpayers' money is being taken to fund private entities. These charter schools are not public entities. So we don't care about you having the charter schools, it's just that you pay for them, but not with our taxpayers' money. We have now a charter school starting in the county, Normandy. So it's on its way. And so MRTA will be aggressively fighting legislation. This is gonna be one of our priorities. We have a new executive director, and she was the legislator for NEA. and Maria Walden, and we followed legislation. And congratulations to you, Dr. Kevin Adams, and I hope your retirement does not be like ours, because some of our members have not received a cost of living. I have never received a cost of living in all the 16 years I have been retired. But thank be to God that I'm able to support myself. But my other people, they cannot, they are suffering. They have to choose, do I buy medicine or do I get food? And this is not just me saying this. They're making $1,000 from their pension. And they've been doing it for 30 years of services. And this is a shame and a scandal. I have to say this. I am against charter schools using public school money. The MRTA is against it, and so am I.
That concludes public comment. Dr. Adams, on to presentations.
Good evening, Mrs. Banks. Do you mind coming forward with the audit report, please?
Well, good evening. We're at the end of the year, practically at the end of the audit. Thank goodness. We certainly look forward to the board approving the audit for fiscal year 2022. We had our audit committee meeting this morning, and I want to thank my team, finance, and in particular, the fiscal control director, Charles Ellis, and the finance director, Victoria Glaspie. So now I'm going to hand it over to our audit committee chair, Marion G. He'll say a few words and pass it on to our external auditor, Ruben Brown. Thank you.
Thank you, Angie. Good evening. My name is Marion G. Again, I am the chair of the audit committee. It is my pleasure to be able to talk to you this evening. As Angie indicated, the audit committee met this morning at 11 o'clock to discuss the FY22 audit and the compliance report with representatives of the Ruben Brown audit firm. On behalf of the committee, I want to thank the team from Ruben Brown, which was led by Ms. Renita Duncan, for their work. The committee would also like to express its appreciation for the work of the SLPS staff, which is led, of course, by Ms. Banks. The audit that you have is really one that has a lot of moving parts to it, and it is somewhat complex. They did an excellent job this year. As Ms. Duncan will indicate during her remarks in a moment, the district did receive an unmodified opinion or a clean opinion. The auditors did issue some recommendations, and the district staff will be preparing a written response, which will be presented to the board. The audit committee will also be submitting some recommendations to the board for its consideration. The audit committee does recommend that the board accept the audit and approve the annual comprehensive financial report and the compliance report for its FY22. I want to just take a quick moment to thank Dr. Adams for his service to the community and to the school district. Thank you so much, sir. I will now turn it over to Renita Duncan from Ruben Brown to present the audit results. Thank you.
Good evening. Good evening. My name is Renita Duncan. I'm an audit partner with Ruben Brown. With me is Alicia Barnum. She's an audit manager. We're both with Ruben Brown. Thank you for having us this evening. As Marion mentioned, we did meet with the audit committee this morning in depth, and we discussed all the draft reports with them over about an hour or so. We meet with the audit committee with management for about 30 minutes, and then management leaves the room and we discuss other matters, closed matters for another 30 minutes just with the audit committee. Just to remind you of the scope of the audit. So this is a financial statement audit. So we are rendering an opinion, which will be an unmodified or clean opinion on the financial statement document. So this is an annual comprehensive financial report. In addition to that, we also do an audit of federal grant expenditures. So this is a compliance audit. And it also looks at internal controls related to federal grant expenditures. As Marion mentioned, this is a huge and heavy undertaking for the finance department or the fiscal department and the grant department of the district. Not only are there lots of grants, lots of large grants, the compliance can be complicated as it relates to reporting to DESI, but also the influx of pandemic funding and trying to get that out to the schools in a timely manner, but also be compliant with all the rules is a heavy lift. As we mentioned, we are going to issue unmodified opinions on both of those reports. In addition to that, we also issue an opinion, which is an examination on transportation costs and also attendance records as well. We did issue 2 recommendations, as Mariam mentioned, and management has put together a remediation plan for those. So they'll be working on those over the next 6 months or so. In addition, the audit committee will be providing oversight in them implementing those plans, as well as the internal auditor at the district. We received full cooperation during the audits. There was nothing that blocked our audit procedures. We're here for 6 to 8 weeks. We start in October and we're finaling our reports now. So within the next 2 weeks, we'll issue final reports. Everything is due by December 31st to the state. At this time, I'll entertain any questions if you have them.
Any questions? I just want to say thank you both. I'm a member of the audit committee as of April, and I've enjoyed learning from you and the scope and depth of the work that you do, and particularly what is required of our staff, which is a Herculean task. And so I was very pleased to hear that you've kicked all the tires and that they're really doing a great job. So hats off once again to our financial staff who do a great job. I also want to thank Mr. Gee, who is just a fabulous chair of this committee as an outside volunteer, and he's recruited additional members from the community to also sort of give us this additional scrutiny as well as advice. And so I look forward to your additional recommendations, but I'm very happy with the team that has been assembled and the work that you've done. So thank you.
Great. Thank you. We appreciate the partnership.
I also want to take a minute as well. Obviously, this is the 14th audit for me, and you have done an excellent job in terms of working with staff. I want to thank Ms. Banks and Ms. Glassby for working extremely hard to make sure that this comes in the way it does. When we started here, we had a number of different recommendations that came through our auditors, and I just want to thank Wilbur Brown for really over the last 14 years, and also Mr. McGee as well in terms of taking the leadership. But hats off to Mrs. Banks and Ms. Glassman and the entire team for the hard work that they do every year to try to present an audit report with very few exceptions. So thank you very much.
I just want to point out to the board that the approval of the annual comprehensive financial report and the compliance report is on the consent agenda of 12/13/22/21. So we will be voting on that.
Okay.
But thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, I had,
Oh.
sorry.
Ms. Sonia has a question.
Not a question, it's a comment as well. First of all, you guys have done such a good job at keeping us up to date and being transparent. Whenever people hear about a $400 million plus budget, is overwhelming. But I made some, as I've been following it and keeping up, I made some notes, and I was especially impressed with your economic outlook or conditions.
So you're referring to the first part of the financial statement document. So that's management's discussion and analysis, and that's actually put together by Mrs. Banks and her team.
Yeah, it was just done exceptionally well. I thought you did a good job at analyzing all of the major financial institutions in St. Louis. I thought that you did a good job at explaining all of the economic responsibilities that St. Louis Public Schools can have. You went really detailed analysis into going from 10% to 30%. I can't remember the exact year, but changing that, when I was reading through it and really learning for myself, I was actually able to follow it really, really well and see the change. And so I saw all the work that was put into it. I saw all the details, and to people in the public who are going to see this and access this, I would definitely encourage you, if you don't read any other part, to look at the economic conditions and outlooks, because I think it can give people good insight to understand where the money goes and how it's spent, all the things that we have to account for that we can't necessarily anticipate, and just tell you all great job.
Yeah, we would remind everyone that the financial statements of the district are a public document. But the depth of the document and the quality of the document that you receive is not, it's beyond what's required. So I want to point that out. Okay.
Thank you, ladies. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Have a
Ms.
good
Banks. The last presentation is Dr. Pollack, who has done a detailed examination of data as it relates to the Confluence proposal that's before you. There is an item on the agenda that I entered into the record on at the last board meeting. And we will be asking you obviously to vote on that tonight as well. Dr. Pollack is the Assistant Superintendent of turnarounds in charter schools. And so he has been really close to this, not just this year, but for the last 5 years, 8 years, I'm sorry, 8 years. And obviously every single year we get proposals to review. And so I'll give him an opportunity to kind of give you an update and have you ask any kind of questions that you might have. Dr. Pollack.
Good evening. So I have the pleasure of going over our results for the evaluation for Confluence Academies tonight. You'll see that we're going to start with a little bit of background of what a charter school is, what sponsorship is, what the proposal evaluation process is for SLPS, what the Confluence proposal details have, the rubric results, and our final recommendation. So a charter school is a separate independent school that is run by a separate independent board. They can exist anywhere within Missouri. Specifically, they exist currently in Kansas City, St. Louis, and Normandy. There are some key differences between charter schools and traditional public schools. And you'll see specifically that in similarities, they do have to have open enrollment until their capacity is reached. A lottery system may then be implemented. Special education services are required, federal programs are required, and participation in statewide assessment programs are required. However, there are some differences. The governing board of charter schools is appointed, not elected. Teacher certification for 20% of teaching staff is not required. High-risk designation is mandated. Charter schools are exempt from all laws other than specific statutes governing Missouri charter schools. The sponsor receives 1.5% of per pupil funding for oversight expenses, and the charter school may be closed if it fails to meet the tenets of that specific charter. There are 3 types of charter sponsors. It can be school boards of accredited districts, qualified universities, and the Missouri Charter Public School Commission. Each sponsor has their own policies. The sponsor receives 1.5%, as I mentioned before, of state and local funding allocated to a charter school up to $125,000 or adjusted for inflation. And so with that, there are also some protections. A sponsor of the charter school, its agents and employees are not liable for any acts or omissions of that charter school that it sponsors. If a sponsor notifies the charter school of closure, the DESE shall exercise its financial withholding authority, and so therefore we are not affected by any charter schools that we sponsor financially. On this slide, you can see the current sponsorship arrangement in St. Louis and Kansas City. You'll notice that several sponsors have stopped sponsoring recently. That includes UCM, that includes University of Missouri, Kansas City, and now includes University of Missouri. You can see as well the Missouri Charter Public School Commission and the various universities. You'll also notice in the bottom right, the Kansas City Public Schools does sponsor 3 schools. The next few slides go through the transfer of sponsorship and what's required. What's required is an approval from its current sponsor, an approval from the receiving sponsor, and an approval from the board of the charter school. That goes to DESE, and then DESE votes for a final approval. What's required in the application is an explanation of why the school is seeking to transfer. In this case, the fact that their sponsor is giving up their sponsorship duties, evidence that they've solicited input, which they have, and the solicited resolution from the governing boards. And then a few more details there. So this is really where I want to slow down and spend some time. This is the evaluation process that we go through every single time that someone applies for a partnership or a charter school with us. Part one includes a detailed proposal. Every time that we've had this, we've then had to ask for additional documentation, a data review, then an interview or interviews clarifying information, then a recommendation to advance or not advance to part two. Part two then includes a capacity interview between the boards, an alignment and enrollment analyses, a final recommendation for approval, the superintendent's approval, board approval, and then DESE submission and approval. In my tenure here, we've had 9 applicants or 9 who have started with their proposals. This is the very first one that we've had go all the way through. You'll see that the initial proposal was submitted by Confluence on November 18th. We requested additional information in the areas below. On November 18th, they responded on November 18th with the additional information. We conducted our review from November 21st through November 30th. We held a clarifying interview on December 5th between leadership members of St. Louis Public Schools and Confluence executive leadership team members. You can see below the topics that were covered. In addition, there was a capacity interview that took place on December 6th between board members from St. Louis Public and board members from Confluence Academies. We completed our enrollment analysis. We gave a final recommendation for approval to the superintendent. The superintendent has brought his approval before the board, and that's the current spot where we are today. DESE submission and approval would take place if it passes tonight in January. On the next slide are the 6 categories. There are 6 categories, 6 measures, and for each of those measures, metrics underneath. The categories are category 1, academics, category 2, attendance, category 3, graduation rate, category 4, finance, category 5, governance, category 6, special considerations. For each of those, you can see the specific metrics to advance without reservations, to advance with reservations, or to not advance. I'll now give a brief overview of Confluence Academies. Confluence Academies is made up of 6 schools, one of which is Grand Center Arts Academy, which has a middle and high school. In addition, as South City Academy with an enrollment of 785 students, Confluence Preparatory Academy, a high school with 405 students, Grand Center Arts Academy, which the middle school has 223 students and the high school has 403 students. Old North, which has an enrollment of 541 and is a pre-K through 8, and Aspire Academy, which recently transitioned to a pre-K through 2 in the Walnut Park neighborhood with 102 students. Those numbers are 21, 22. You'll see later some 22, 23 numbers, which are more updated. This also included in the deck. Facility ownership characteristics. Confluence is particular in the fact that it owns the majority of its facilities. The one facility that it doesn't own is at the South City site. It's owned by the church next door and they have a lease agreement with them. Other than that, they do own their facilities. This has led to a significant debt, which we'll get to in a moment. Here you'll see the historic enrollment. Back in 2016-17, they were at 3,486 students. They're now at 2,309 students, or rather with pre-K, 2,427 students. So they have seen a historical enrollment decline similar to the one that we have experienced over the past 5 years. You can see the demographics. One of the things about Confluence is that their schools do serve demographically similar populations as to SLPS. You can see the comparisons between each of the schools, Confluence average and SLPS average. I'd like to point out at South City, they have a significant Hispanic population of 48.2%, and a large English learner population of 37.2%. That school also has a New American program. Here you can see the expenditures per pupil over time. You'll notice that there is variance in between the expenditures per pupil at the various schools. I'd like to point out GCAA High is spending $13,830 per student, whereas Confluence Preparatory Academy is spending $15,982 per student, and GCA Middle is spending $18,969. One of the things you'll notice is that GCA Middle has had a significant decreasing enrollment, and that's one of the reasons why the expenditures per pupil is so high there. So on the next 3 slides are the rubric results. For academics, their APR at the last administration of MAP that was used for accreditation purposes by DESE, 2018-19 was 72.3%. And ELA, the overall MPI was 338.5%, 338.5, and for math, 309.1. However, you'll notice that at ELA, 5 out of 5 schools all exceeded the target of 300, so all of their schools did. Only 3 out of 5 passed the target in math. So given their overall averages beating the target, we are advancing without reservations in academics. In attendance, pre-pandemic 2018-19, 83.6% of students were above 90% attendance. 5 out of 6 schools exceeded the attendance target of 80% above 90%. 4 out of 6 schools were in the top quartile as compared to SLPS schools. However, post-pandemic 2020-2021, only 54.3% of students were above 90% attendance. 0 out of 6 schools exceeded the attendance target of 80%, and only 1 out of the 6 schools were in the top quartile of schools in SLPS. Therefore, we are advancing with reservations, and I'll get to that at the end of the presentation. In category 3, graduation rate, the overall 4-year graduation rate was below 82%. However, 1 out of the 2 schools exceeded the 82% graduation rate, and that would be Grand Center Arts Academy. So therefore, we are advancing with reservations, which I'll get to at the end. In category 4, finance, there is a sufficient fund balance of 39%, which is 17 million as of fiscal year 2022. In addition, they provided a clean financial audit. However, there is a significant debt exposure present of 28.7 million. The debt is held by a nonprofit, Friends of Confluence, and is primarily for the facilities that we mentioned before. So therefore, we will advance with reservations, and I'll explain that at the end. In terms of governance, they have a positive recommendation from their current sponsor. The board has deep experience. Members of the board have stayed on from when they were 2 separate schools, when Grand Center Arts was separate from Confluence before they merged. So they have a deep experience and deep alignment to their various schools. They also have experience with examining and acting on data that the board and sponsor recommendations. So there have been many times that their board and that their sponsor have provided recommendations that they have therefore acted on. Most recently, they did the sponsor requested or offered an audit of their curriculum and has led to their implementation of core knowledge CKLA program. So therefore, in terms of governance, we have found that to advance without reservations. In terms of special considerations, we want to point out the unique programmatic elements. They have art strands with industry professionals as instructors. That is how they use their 20% non-certified staff at GCAA. That is something that we can't do by statute. They have esports. They have a newcomer program similar to our NCAA. Similar to our Nike Chapman, and they have an early childhood center, which is what they've turned their Aspire site into. Variance does exist in per pupil expenditures across schools, and they have a diverse population of students served. And they have exhibited an intentionality to serve all students who enroll. So therefore, we find our final recommendation is to advance with reservations, with expectations to meet the categories 2, 3, and 4 by the end of their charter term. I'll go through those. So the expectations were found to be met in categories 1, 5, and 6. The expectations were not fully met in category 2. The attendance rate did not meet target post-pandemic. Continued monitoring and action is required in this area. Expectations were not fully met in category 3. Graduation rate did not meet the target at one of the 2 schools. Disparate outcomes and funding across the schools must be studied and addressed when sponsorship is approved. So this is one of the things that we have already offered to Confluence as part of this is to fund through the funds that we get an equity study comparing the performance and the funding at each of their various schools. And finally, expectations were not fully met in category 4. Debt exposure was present. An aggressive debt repayment plan that is not dependent on enrollment growth must be established and executed when sponsorship is approved. So with that, I will conclude the presentation and open it up for questions.
Questions from the board at this time. Thank you, Dr. Pollack.
Dr. Pollack, I'd like to just kind of take a couple minutes to sort of go through what a sponsor does and what a sponsor doesn't do, and try to, as much as you can, put it into the context of what a school district sponsoring a charter does and what they don't do, and maybe how that's different than a university. Just because this is our first endeavor into this, and I think it's important for the board to understand, the staff here to understand, as well as the public to understand, because I do think there is some misconception. So I kind of want to just sort of walk you through some of my questions on that regard with that preamble. So first of all, we would be the third, maybe fourth if you count the Arts Academy sponsor of Confluence since it's existed a little over 15 years. Is that right?
Yes.
And so do you know why the reasons were that the sponsorships, we know Mizzou is getting out of the business? Do we know why the other changes happened?
Well, the change from St. Louis University, when Grand Center Arts was under St. Louis University, to the University of Missouri was because of the merger. And so that was part of the merger that took place. And prior to that, it was a transition point. My understanding is Confluence was previously under a different CMO, a national CMO, and then moved to take ownership locally to their local board. As they did that, they also transitioned sponsors, and as we said, now the sponsor that they currently have is going out of, they're giving up their sponsorship responsibilities in September of 2023. And so this opens the possibility for other sponsors.
And a CMO is a charter
management
organization, and that's usually a private company that is there to do, it can be any range of activities. It could just be sort of back office activities. It could go as far as curriculum and human resources, all that sort of thing.
Yes, and my understanding is that when they were under that national CMO, that it was the national CMO ran the organization. So it wasn't like other charter schools where they just, it might have been in name only or some slight pieces. That was the institution that was running the schools. And then it became a local institution when it converted to Confluence, and has gone from there.
So they don't currently use a CMO.
Correct.
And it's managed by a CEO who's an employee of the nonprofit that is run by a board.
That is correct.
And that's the more typical model that we see today.
Specifically in St. Louis. In other cities, there are more frequent, I would say, national CMOs, charter management organizations. But in St. Louis, we find that the majority of schools are run by local boards and local CEOs.
And since they've transitioned from the CMO to the local CEO, they call the CEO would be an equivalent of our superintendent. Has their performance stabilized, or, and I use performance in the way that the state board uses performance. Has it stabilized? Has it improved?
So I would say that on a couple of metrics, yes. So specifically financially, they are in a much stronger position now, even as they weren't before, and especially once Grand Center Arts merged with them. Grand Center Arts was under financial strain. Now they are not, as you can see. However, or in addition, I'd like to say that their MPI scores in ELA and math and their APR scores showed significant improvement in the tenure of the current CEO and the current board. So in the 2 years before, you can see the progression of the APR and the MPI over the 3 years prior to the data that I've shown today.
So under the previous sponsor, who I think it's fair to say had been troubled in terms of the scrutiny that sponsor received from the state board, they've had schools removed from their sponsorship. I think they were prevented from sponsoring any new schools, and they were really down to just a couple of schools, Confluence being one of them. In terms of that arrangement, one of the criticisms that the state board had of that sponsor was their reticence to close schools, particularly prior to the CEO, to close Confluence, some of the schools or all of them altogether. And you can debate the wisdom of that sponsor. There's ethical reasons why you wouldn't close schools, which we are all very well aware of. But in terms of the statute and the arrangement and the agreement that charter schools make for the different type of accountability that they have from school districts is, well, if you're not doing better than the school district, you close. So that has kind of been, as I understand, sort of the history of the 15 years. I almost want to say that at times they've been too big to fail, because we know that, 2,400 kids in schools, a school system closing, and it would be chaos for us, be chaos particularly for those students and families. I guess my question then, if we are to assume sponsorship, will be held to those same sort of metrics that the state board held the previous sponsors. Whereas if these schools are not performing, they're going to require us to close them, or urge us as strongly as they possibly can under the law to close them. Is that your understanding?
Yeah, so a little bit of nuance on that. So my understanding is that the sponsor cannot close individual schools within a charter network. So one of the things that we've had frank conversations with Confluence directly about this, that we are seeing variance in the performance between schools, and that we are seeing variance in the funding between schools as well. And so that is the point of where we've talked about this equity study and this intentionality that we have, that we're calling to question this piece around is performance at all of your schools exceeding the district? Are using the resources you have to actually outperform? And so that is something, one of the things that we have, part of this agreement would be that they do come in whole, that that there is no closure conversation prior to them becoming part of our sponsorship. We are looking to be partners with them. We are looking for them to be successful and for us to be successful, to learn from each other, to coordinate with each other. So if consolidations do have to happen in the neighborhood, for instance, that we can organize that in a way that doesn't leave an education desert, for instance. So I think that this is something that we are cognizant of, that they are cognizant of, but we understand our role and they understand their role.
In my meeting and Ms. Cousins' meeting with their board chair and their vice chair, that's consistent with our discussion, is that they understand the limitations of, and just as we have them, especially in certain neighborhoods where the schools are becoming under-enrolled, or they face particular challenges, and you can see their school from the front steps of our school. And it doesn't make sense. It's not in good service to the kids in that neighborhood if we're working against each other. So I would agree with that. I want to kind of talk then, just to sort of be specific about what this would mean if we approve it. So, there's been words thrown around like you're taking over, you're going to control the school, you're merging, you're absorbing. That's not what this proposal is. This is to assume a sponsorship, in which case, could you just sort of explain how that will work from a district perspective? And I guess to sort of clear up the fact that our superintendent is not going to be the superintendent of those schools.
That is absolutely correct. So the intention of a sponsorship arrangement is accountability with autonomy, or autonomy with accountability. That's the intent of charter schools, to be honest. We're also not, to be clear, we're not looking to sponsor. This is not sponsoring a new charter school. I want to say that again. So this is not about sponsoring a new charter school. This is about looking at the reality that exists and trying to figure out where to go from here. So the idea is that they have autonomy to make decisions. They have a board, they have a CEO, a superintendent, and they make those decisions according to their statute. We are there to check on their performance, to check on their compliance to any state requirements, and then to also be thought partners with them. So and that's when one of the things you asked was, what's the difference of being a district as a sponsor rather than being a university? All universities bring to bear resources that they have. So a lot of universities will try and bring in extra tutoring. They'll bring in extra expertise from their professors. And so one of the things that we have is some knowledge about how to educate kids. And so we would offer those things. However, to be clear, that would have to be desired and accepted from the charter school. So they would be able to say, yes, no, maybe, tell me more about that. And at the end of the day, make their own choice about the offers that we're making. However, at the end of the 4 years, we have to make a decision about whether or not they have met the metrics that we've laid out before them.
I want to ask too about finances. So just to be clear, this would change nothing with how our school district is financed and their school district is financed, correct?
That is correct.
And so in terms of their indebtedness, the school district, SOPS, will not be on the hook for any of their debt at any time.
That is correct. And
And-
so one of the things, sorry, but one of the
Okay.
things that we've put in there is a repayment, an aggressive repayment plan. That is not because we are worried about accepting the debt. That is because we want to make sure that they are spending their dollars on kids rather than on debt. And the sooner that they clear that debt out, the sooner that they can allocate their funds to their children. So that is an intentionality for them as a sponsor, something that we see about their finances. That is not a concern. In no way are our finances affected. The only effect is that they do pay, all charters pay 1.5% of their revenue to the charter sponsor for sponsoring responsibilities.
And so that leads into my next question. What are the district resources that are going to be required for us to become a charter sponsor?
So a lot of that will live in my office. A lot of that will be my experience with them and with the sponsorship of them. And then anything else from the district would be up to the district to say, we have this capacity that we can offer, and up to them to accept it. But beyond everything would live in my office rather than affecting this. This won't take anything away from any other schools. This won't take any resources away from any other principals. There is some synergy that might be there, some conversations that we've already had with them prior to this coming up around shared services, around shared back office, around transportation, around special education, things that are struggle points for all of us. And so, of course, we would explore that with them. But again, all things are offers rather than requirements.
And what would be the role of the Board of Education, the elected Board of Education of the city of St. Louis, in terms of our involvement being a sponsor?
So you would get regular updates from my office about what the sponsorship was, how it was going, the Confluence's performance, all in light of a final decision in 4 years, whether or not to continue their charter or not based on their performance agreement. So at the end of that term, this board would then, our office would make a recommendation to the superintendent, would then make a recommendation to you to continue sponsorship or not, to continue their charter or not. You all would then make that decision to DESE, and DESE would then accept.
And would we get periodic reports in terms of your evaluation of how they are performing in terms of the sponsorship contract?
Yes, and currently most sponsors, in fact, University of Missouri is in the schools monthly to observe, to see what's happening, and gives regular updates. I think it's either semi-annual or annual updates to their board, and so clearly we would do that as well.
My last question, and I apologize, I'll not dominate all the questions, but in terms of the timing, so when was it learned that the University of Missouri was no longer going to be a sponsor going into the next school year?
So I'm not sure exactly the date, but I think it was in September or October, that they sent a formal letter.
And you put in your presentation that in order to transfer sponsorship, there's a deadline to get that information to DESE by February 1st.
So yes, that is, we are preferred. We are trying to get that information to them in January to be ahead of that.
Okay, but if you miss that deadline, then that would cause problems in terms of DESE being able to act in terms of the state board's calendar. And so that's why they set those deadlines.
Yes, I think that's one of the reasons why the timeline has been so tight. Another is to provide stability to the families at the school.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question. Well, first, thank you for your work putting this together. As I told you last week, this is a lot of work, and I appreciate the data. I have a question about the fact that, so Kansas City is the closest one in terms of similar to us that have undertaken something like this. And I know that you do your research. So tell me what the relationship looks like with Kansas City and the charter schools, and how you see some of that possibly mirroring for us.
Yeah, so Kansas City, as I said, has accepted sponsorship of 3 schools. It is very similar to what I described. We were in touch with them several times over this process and as recently as I think it was last week. And so they are in their schools monthly. They're offering support from, and some of them, they said that some schools, want the sponsor, invite the sponsor and want the sponsor at their leadership team meetings, and they want them at their board meetings. They want them at like everything. And some of those charter schools are like, actually, we just want you to come to our board meetings. Like that's enough. And come in once a month for your visits, and that's good. And so they've made a relationship. They've tailored their support to each school based on what that school is requesting. Again, the idea being autonomy and accountability.
Thank you.
I do have a question. I want to know what your role is in SLPS, because it sounds like you are the charter school person representing all the charter schools in St. Louis City. Is that correct?
No, I am the charter liaison for the district. So when we have built relationships in some way with charters, whether it's during the pandemic, when we were sharing food service sites, or when the charters put together the letter recently about the CVPA incident, I'm the liaison to the groups about that.
So if this district were to conduct a sponsorship, then you would be in charge of that particular.
So I do have other responsibilities in the district. I do facilitate the redesign fellowship currently, and I've done various things. I was the board secretary for a while. The sponsorship office is staffed at the pleasure of the superintendent, to be honest. And so if the superintendent said, we want a different person in that sponsorship office, that's how that would be.
Okay. And so the independent board, you're saying that Confluence has an independent board. I didn't get a chance. I know Matt said he and Ms. Cousins were the ones who sat in on the meeting. So I still feel like I'm in the dark about what this is all about. I read through the literature as well, but I'm feeling really uncomfortable. And with the independent board, whenever you look these things up, I don't see the faces of these individuals who are, because I understand that this is a publicly funded, privately owned entity. And so it's kind of scary to me, because who is really behind this and the reasons why? Because everything that you've said, they sound as if they're failing all the way around, and eventually they're going to collapse. And so they're going to eventually make their way to St. Louis Public School or some other type of educational institution. And so I don't know, you're saying that there's a possibility of this district having to share transportation responsibilities, perhaps shared space, that kind of thing. Is that correct?
No, so I must have misspoken. I apologize. So this district doesn't have to do anything that they don't want to do.
But that's a possibility if you're a sponsor of a charter school.
As a sponsor of a charter school, you can offer support. What that support looks like has not been decided yet.
Right.
So that would be for this board and for the superintendent to decide, this is the support that we want to offer. It hasn't been decided. Those are some areas that could be areas for efficiency, areas that we may be struggling with or they may be struggling with. But none of that's been offered or accepted at this point.
I guess it's kind of scary to me, again, because SLPS has its own issues right now. And I don't know, I was thinking that you take care of home first, and I'm not trying to be prejudiced toward the other students, but those parents made a choice, and SLPS is the best choice to me, number one choice. So, I mean, they have every opportunity to come and join SLPS, and I don't see how it is that we're trying to make it easy for the charter schools to become okay. I understand their trouble that they're in, but we did not create that problem. So I understand, I see all the hard work that was put into this, but again, charter schools in my neighborhood, and I can look at Walnut Park, they're no better off. I mean, we've worked hard at SLPS, Herzog, and all the other schools, Wallbridge in my neighborhood, and the charter schools are not faring well at all. And I remember many charter school people or children that were in high school that no longer exist, like Imagine, and they're so hurt because their school, they can't go back and say, this is my school. They have nowhere to go for their, to say, oh, my school used to be here. So I just I'm just really, I'm not in favor of it, but good luck with that.
I think if I could, I think that we are not on the hook for their success. That is not what sponsorship is. We are offering support, but at the end of the day, the charter schools have to succeed on their own. That's what they are, to your point. They have 4 more years with DESE, whether we sponsor them or not. Maybe they won't get another sponsor, but at the end of the day, DESE's approved them for 4 more years. At the end of those 4 more years, someone's going to make a decision about who they are, if they continue. I think we have a moral responsibility as the Board of Education to own the education in the city. And this is, like I said, we're not creating Confluence. This is not us saying we want to create a charter school. This exists. And so the question really is, do we want to step into that role of saying, if this exists, we want to hold the accountability measures and the concern, because we want to uphold what we value for the city.
I think it's the moral responsibility of those people who created that entity, and then we don't have to take on their responsibility, that they have an obligation to make sure that their students are doing well, and that we don't have that placed on our shoulders, because that's not our responsibility right now. I think we have a moral responsibility to make sure those who are under our guise, because we're taking in the disabled, children from all backgrounds and what have you. And I think that's our first and foremost obligation. But to say that we are responsible for what the charter school people do or don't do is not our obligation. It's not. I just feel that way.
Hi, Dr. Pollack.
Hi, how are you?
Good. Okay, so obviously we got this presentation last week. I've gotten so many questions. So what I really want to do is ask the questions that I've been getting and get an answer. I also want to make sure that we're humanizing this, because I hear you charter management organizations, charter schools. I hear us talking a lot about these big picture organizations, these big picture institutions. Obviously, from working together, being at the citywide educational plan, being on the Board of Education, I think we understand some of the concerns that we hear being lifted up, but what I haven't heard you talk about is the children. And so I want to hear, how will this impact the children? And I want to hear both scenarios that are possible today. If we don't sponsor Confluence Academy, how will that impact the children and the families in those schools? Because I think education is full of hierarchies, and unfortunately, usually the children at the bottom. So I want to put them at the top, and I want us to talk about it from that standpoint. And then I want to talk about the other way. If we do sponsor, what does that do for the children and families?
Thank you. I appreciate that question very much. So part of the due diligence was an opportunity for me to visit all 6 schools. And what I saw at the 6 schools varied, but I'd like to go through a couple of those. So number 1, I'll start with Walnut Park neighborhood, and I'll start with Aspire. So pre-K through 2 exists. They changed from their pre-K through 8 to a pre-K through 2. What I observed when I was there is that they have 90 families, 90 kids who show up. The teachers are happy. They have a facility that is clean, that is bright, that is positive, that they have a field that has full access. They have access to a full institution, a full school that's there. And what I see when I walk through that building, what I think about is the Hyde Park neighborhood. When we closed Clay, and when the Arch Community School closed, and when the Lutheran school closed, all because there was no coordination between those. I think about South City Academy that has almost 50% of their population Hispanic students. 700 students fill into that school every single day. With a veteran teaching staff outperforming the schools in that neighborhood, with a significant ELL population, a newcomer program that we also have. And I think about the trust that Hispanic community has put into that school. When we've got a school straight down the street from there, Merrimack, that's only got 200 some kids in it. And I think about the trust of that community and the trust that would be shattered. And I'm not saying that it's our fault in any way, but I'm thinking about the trust that would be shattered and the kids that would be affected if that school closed. I think about Grand Center Arts And the fact that they have, and this is something that we can't do by statute, that they have industry professionals teaching for teachers for dance, 4 teachers for theater, 4 teachers for music, and I'm missing one. So 16 arts teachers who are industry professionals who work in arts that walk their kids down to the Kaufman Arts Center or to the Fox or to other programs to actually experience art because of the location that they're in, and the theater that they have experience in, the Sun Theater that they now own, that is a full, beautiful theater. And so those are some of the elements that they have. And again, there are some other elements that they need to improve. And I'm not walking away from that in any way. I don't think, and I wouldn't do that from a moral perspective. I wouldn't do that. So I think the question is, in terms of sponsorship, again, if we're sponsoring with them, there are things that we can offer to them and things that they can offer to us. But at the end of the day, it still puts the control of what happens in our hands. So, and to be explicit, their APR and their MPI on average outperform the averages for SLPS. And that's what DESE requires us to look at. That's what DESE wants us to look at. What we've done, which is a little bit different than most sponsors, is to say we want to look at the individual schools, because a student's experience at one school is not the same as a different school. And we want to be able to differentiate that. And that's not something that the charter world looks at right now. And so that's something that we look at internally in terms of equity. So that's something that we've called to the table.
Okay. And then, so in the, is there any information on, because I know obviously for us, enrollment has a lot to do with location. That data is not always as clear when you're analyzing this. And even in my own research, I couldn't find a lot of information. Do we know any information on where these scholars and families actually live in the schools? Obviously we know where they go, but where do they live? Because what we're hearing is, well, they can just go to a SLPS school. Why? So I want to talk about geographically, where are the children and the families?
So in terms of, I'll take that by individual school. So on the north side, they have Aspire, which is now pre-K through 2, and they have Old North. Those 2 schools serve the north side, and they provide transportation across the north side for that. Pre-K 2 at both sites, they've recently consolidated, so 3 through 8, they all go to Old North. Those students live on the north side. South City, that's their South City school. So that's pre-K through 8 across all of South City, and I guess, the middle of the city as well. For Grand Center Arts, they do have some students that come from the county to attend as part of the DSEG program. Their highest percentage of, the highest zip code is Benton Park. And it's 70% African-American and 30% white. So that's a little bit of perspective about GCAA. And then Confluence Preparatory Academy is their other high school, and it pulls from across the city. They do provide transportation at all their locations.
Okay, and then I asked about geographics, and you hinted at this a little bit earlier, but if we don't sponsor Confluence and that leads to the eventual closing of some of the schools, where will that leave educational gaps? Because obviously, like you said, with Clay School, we closed that. We've done some school closings. I just want to make sure that for the public, we are looking at this as an ecosystem and as a system, because these children, whether or not, when I'm outside, when I'm at the grocery store, I'm not asking, whether or not a child goes to SLPS or if they go to a charter school for me to lend a helping hand or ask questions. So I'm just curious about what everybody should have is schools in their community. And because we did close some schools, I just want us to talk a little bit about where will educational gaps be if some of those schools close? What difficulties would that create for those families and those children? Because we don't right now have any alternate plans in place with that.
I think you've summarized it.
Okay. I just want to be sure. And then I also had a question. Another concern that I got is obviously teachers. SLPS is very proud supporter of unions. I feel like we've done some historical things as a board with our unions and our teachers and making sure that they're compensated. And again, I think this is kind of to Matt's question earlier about what sponsors do and what sponsors don't do. Is there any way that this could lead to SLPS not supporting our teachers and our staff having unions? Does this give us any oversight or any influence on Confluence having unions or other benefits and compensations that their staff get? Can you just talk about that?
Sure. So they are not currently unionized. As you all know, KIPP recently unionized their teachers. Their teachers unionized, voted to unionize. They're a charter school that's not sponsored by the district. So at any point, Confluence's teachers could vote to unionize. They did poll their teachers about their teachers and their students, families. Sorry, their teachers and their families about the transition of the possible transition of sponsorship. And the results was mixed. Some of the teachers said, you know, we would be really excited to join SLPS because of the idea of a union. That was included in some of their comments. So I think that but again, that is independent. That is their choice of how they decide that they want to move forward. But of course, you know, a lot of this is about relationships, and a lot of this is about us being able to share what we feel like is powerful for us.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say one last thing in regards to location that Ms. Sanye brought up. Right now, I currently sit on the real estate committee with Ms. Cousins, and we have ample real estate available. There are people who are coming in and basically almost want some of our real estate for free. So it is imperative, and it's on us, that we make sure that we don't have those educational deserts, and it's all possible. So I don't see where there's a possibility where we are going to have a permanent educational vacancy within the community, especially with the citywide planning going on. This is why I was hoping that we would also put a halt to some of our real estate purchasing, because we really need to look at what's going on in the citywide planning committee. They're sitting there and they're planning, people are dedicating all these hours and hard work to this plan, but you have to consider, where are all the schools and where are all the vacant schools? Before you start saying, oh, well, we're gonna have one here, one there, one there. Let's stop and let's take a look at our inventory, because we have plenty of schools, plenty of empty schools too. So I don't think that'll be a problem. Thank you.
Dr. Pollack, you've been doing this for how long?
This is my 8th year here, and then
In your 8 years, you said you've had how many charters that have attempted or has come to the board or to the district?
So by my count, this is number 9 of either a partner or a charter that has approached us.
And out of the 9, you're saying this is the one that you would recommend of your 8 years experience?
Well, and to be clear, we have followed the same process across all of them. So I have no particular love of Confluence beyond any other applicant that has come. I have been thorough. We have been thorough in terms of every applicant that's approached us.
And I like what Ms. Jones stated in regards to the citywide education plan, and as well as in regards to the building. And I like how you referenced the Clay closing down and the other schools, the charter as well as the Lutheran school that closed down in one community. And because of the lack of that level of communication with those different entities, we all, as those that are supposed to be responsible for education, really single-handedly created an educational desert for that particular community, correct?
Correct.
So in going in this direction, referring back to the citywide education plan, identifying where and what the needs are, the relationships that we've been able to have with the different diverse groups that are at the table regarding the citywide education plan, in your opinion, do you think it would be wise for St. Louis Public School Board to serve as a sponsor for Confluence Academy?
I think that it puts us in the driver's seat of a decision that's going to be made in 4 years.
Thank you.
Ms. Hubbard?
Who actually has to do who's going to do all the checks on the performance? Was that going to be your job?
That would be my job, yes. Well, that would be the sponsor office's job. And again, to the question that was raised earlier, the superintendent, the incoming superintendent, the permanent superintendent can staff that office as they see fit.
Thanks.
I just wanted to make sure that we understand that we are in the process of hiring a new superintendent. And it just seems kind of unfair to put this on them right now. I think we should hold up and allow our new superintendent to make these decisions in the direction we're going. It's a lot.
So on that same note, if we don't sponsor and schools close, the superintendent is going to have to gonna have to, as a district, we're gonna have to prepare to take those children on, right?
So again, if we don't sponsor, there are other sponsors that could sponsor them, and they would default to the Missouri Charter Public School Commission.
And go ahead.
So, and what happens from there is what happens from there. So we can't predict what happens from there, but I want to be clear about the process.
Right, but what I'm saying is long-term, that there is data, that there is numbers, that there is facts, that we do know how often the Missouri Charter School Association closes schools. We know how they evaluate, and you just reviewed the data of how all these schools are operating. So I'm sure that, I'm just gonna say it, we're not reaching far out to say that based off of the Missouri Charter Schools Association's criteria, we can look at that data and see what schools they would keep open and what schools they might potentially close. I'm not saying that's a fact, but that's a possibility. And likely, some of the schools will be closed. And if that was the case, whoever that superintendent is will have to immediately prepare to add those schools and those children to the district, which we're talking about thousands of kids.
Yes, and I'll just say one more time that any sponsor cannot choose to close individual schools. So if a sponsor chooses to end sponsorship or to cease the charter of it, then all the schools would close at the same time.
Okay, and on that same note, is it if again, I'm saying if they close, because I'm saying if we don't sponsor and it leads to schools being closed, can you talk to me about what the process is for St. Louis Public Schools to prepare for absorbing those thousands of schools? How would that impact our staff? How would that impact the quality of education of the children that are currently at the schools that the other kids would join? How would that impact the quality of the education of the kids that would come here? Like, I just want us to really be honest and put it out there, because this is what decision-making is about. It's about looking into the future and looking to the impact. So please talk to me and everybody listening about, I keep hearing like, oh yeah, you could just absorb them. Like we could just snap our fingers and be prepared to do that. What is that process like? What are the challenges? What are the, what is that like?
So with permission, I'd like to defer to Dr. Adams as the superintendent who was there when this occurred.
So based on the history that has occurred in the past, we have to, depending on the time, a lot depends on the time when DESE makes some final decision, or in this case, the charter school sponsor makes some final decision. We have to hire staff, obviously work our routes for students, find out locations where kids can go.
And you said we have to hire staff, and right now we have staffing shortages as it is, right?
We have about 300 vacancies with building level substitutes managing classes right now. So it will be a hefty responsibility to quickly turn and absorb any number of students, let alone 2,400 students. The timing is a big factor. If it happens, obviously, in the next 6 months, we would have to go through all kind of processes to look at buildings and all of those kinds of things. If it happens in the middle of the school year, it's another issue. If it happens 3 or 4 years from now, obviously, we have more time to look at that. A lot of the factors will be determined by the timing of when a decision is made. But we've done this before, and it was not easy to do.
Any other questions from board members? Ms. Fowl.
I'm just thinking of the political backlash that could happen if we do take sponsorship. We take that on, we put that under our umbrella of responsibility, and the school does underperform and get closed anyway. Have we considered what that's going to look like for us?
Could you repeat that one more time, please?
If we are to take on Confluence and they end up being closed, 4 years down the line anyway, due to underperformance, have we considered the political backlash of what that will look like for SLPS being the responsible entity?
So I think Dr. Pollock could define really well what our responsibility is. We're not responsible for them being successful or being successful or unsuccessful. Our responsibility is to provide them support if they need it or want it. From a political perspective, I think the focus of Mrs. Sanye's concern was about what's best for the students. And so we have not thought about the political challenges that might come as a result of doing this. I received a call today from a couple of legislators, really thankful that we were even looking at this as a possibility to support students. So I think it really depends upon what side are you on as it relates to the politics of this. But at the end of the day, I think Dr. Pollock's recommendation, my recommendation is based on what's best for 2,400 students at this point in time.
Can I add to that? From my understanding as a board member,
Is it not our fiduciary responsibility to ensure the education of all kids, not just St. Louis Public School kids, but it's our fiduciary responsibility as board members to ensure that the kids are getting the adequate education that they're supposed to be receiving?
That is the charter school, that is the law as it stands right now. For any student in the city of St. Louis, we are responsible for providing them with the educational options, the challenge. Even if a charter school closes today or tomorrow, we are going to be responsible for managing what happens with all of the records, everything that happens as a result of that school closing, we will be responsible. That's the law right now.
I think we, as we center back the kids, these are all our children. We will profit by or pay for whatever they become. I think James Baldwin put it back. I think that we have a responsibility to ensure that children are well, that they're thriving. When we talk to educators and they talk about the violence that's happening in our city, the fact that there are many students who have been killed even since the tragic shooting just a few weeks ago. We are at a very critical point when it comes to education and SOPS and the thriving of our kids. It's impossible not to think that we shouldn't consider this in a meaningful way because they matter. They matter. They matter what happens in our future. They matter what happens in our city, and they're important.
I want to make sure if there's any other questions, we get to them, although I do think that's a good note to stop on, but.
Well, I
go
do
ahead.
have one last thing to say. I also believe that our students are very, very important. And I just really feel like it's important that we start to look at SLPS and make sure that we have a strong core. I understand caring about all of the students and all the children in SLPS. Who wouldn't? I do. I would not have run again. It's been 16 years. I stayed fast because I want to advocate for our students. And I'm upset because I see students dying every day. I'm sure Dr. Adams has a list yay long of our students that have passed away. But where does DESE have some responsibility? What do these other entities, I just want to stop allowing other people to get away with doing stuff and nobody's holding them responsible. You're just looking at SLPS like, oh, we're not going to do our job by taking on Confluence. I'm sure you got enough votes right now to say yes. It's okay, whatever you do, I'll accept whatever you do. But I'm just saying, hold DESE responsible as well, and the rest of the charter school people are responsible for what they're doing, destroying our children's lives. Because they're half doing stuff around here, and nobody's there. They're talking like everything is okay. I heard what he said. He was saying not adequate, not adequate. Every time he said something was not adequate, my goodness, sound like it's getting ready to close tomorrow. So I'm saying hold them responsible too. If you're gonna make it okay, let's make sure DESE knows what's going on. Because let's not wait 4 years, because 4 years out of our students' lives is 4 years too long. Thank you.
Ms. Sonia, and then we'll conclude.
I don't disagree with anything that Donna said. I really don't. The problem though is kids should not be casualties of war. Like kids and families they should not have to be casualties of war. Whatever this system is, and I'm saying this as the youngest person here, like whatever this system is, that's because leaders all across the board have allowed this ecosystem to exist, has allowed this reality to come into existence. But it is not the kids and the families that should have to continue, I was asking about the geography question because they deal with destabilization, they deal with unhoused issues, they deal with having to feed their kids, they deal with the same things that we have to deal with. And obviously we all know, like we wouldn't be here. We asked for a moratorium. We're constantly going to the state legislature to do the work to fix these issues, but we have to do this work and make sure that kids don't have to pay for what adults have done systematically. That is not their fault. And if whatever happens to them, we all will pay for it. We will all benefit from, or we will all pay for it. But at no point am I comfortable. And I expect us as Board of Education members for the city of St. Louis, I expect us to have hearts and to have compassion and to have empathy for everyone that is involved in education, from staff to students to teachers to families, but especially the kids. And the moment that we lose that heart and we lose that empathy and we lose that compassion in our leadership, we become just like the people we're constantly calling out and attacking.
Thank you, Dr. Pollack. This item is on the consent agenda. We'll take it separately so we can have additional discussion if necessary. It's 12-13-22-22. But we do move on now to the consent agenda. There's a number of new items on that. We'll start with just taking if there's any items up to the new items, if any member wants to take separately, other than the Confluence?
I do. I have an item 12, 13, 22, 12,
Okay,
and item number. Jesus. 12, 13, 22, 12. I had a question.
okay,
And item number 12, 13, 22, 20. Those are
Okay.
the two.
so if there's no questions about 12, 13, 2201 through 12, 13, 2211, could we get a motion to approve those items?
I make go ahead. Go for it, I say.
I move that we approve items 12, 13, 2201 through 12, 13, 2211.
Second.
Any discussion? Mrs. Henry, could you call the roll vote?
Ms. Hubbard,
Yes.
Ms. Hogan.
Yes.
Ms. Sonia.
Yes.
Ms. Val,
Yes.
Ms. Jones.
Yes.
Ms. Cousins.
Yes.
Mr. Davis.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Could we get a motion to approve 12, 13, 2212?
I make a motion to approve 12,
Second.
13, 22, 20.
Second.
All right, discussion, Ms. Jones.
I wanted to just have a brief explanation of what this means.
We received dollars from the State Department of Education for adult education. And so all of this is to support adult education. The dollars come from the state. And that's what this is. This entity gets a sub-grant agreement from us, but the dollars really come through us to them from the state.
So is this being held in an SLPS school or?
I don't know exactly where this one is being held. I don't have the information in front of me. I can get that information from you, but normally they are in SLPS schools, but also in other places across the city as well.
Thank you.
It's been moved and seconded. Ms. Henry, could you call the roll on 12, 13, 2212?
Ms. Hubbard. Yes. Ms. Hogan.
Yes.
Ms. Sonia.
Yes.
Ms. Val,
Yes.
Ms. Jones.
Yes.
Ms. Cousins.
Yes.
Mr. Davis.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Could we get a motion to approve 12, 13, 2213 through 12, 13, 2219?
I make a motion to approve 12, 13, 22, 13, I'm sorry, through 19.
Yeah. Second.
Any discussion? Mrs. Henry?
Ms. Hubbard.
Yes.
Ms. Hogan.
Yes.
Ms. Sonia.
Yes.
Ms. Val,
Yes.
Ms. Jones. Ms. Cousins.
Yes.
Mr. Davis.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Could we get a motion to approve 12, 13, 2220?
Motion to approve 12, 13, 22, 20. Second.
All right, discussion, Ms. Jones.
My question was, this is a memorandum to approve an understanding with St. Louis Association of Community Organizations, SLACO, in order to pursue wraparound services. I think we had this on the agenda last month.
Yes, ma'am. That was on
And what
November.
happened? Did something change? Is it different?
I brought it back to the board based on me providing the board with a full explanation in writing relative to this item. And so I sent it to the board. I did not receive any questions regarding it, but I answered all of the questions that were raised by board members in detail regarding this particular item.
So there's no possibility of, since this organization, they can't provide funds to pay our staff to provide these wraparound services. They just want to utilize our facilities, correct?
They're working through the Urban League, and that is the partner that they're working through as it relates to this particular community. This is a proof of concept, if you will, to see how this works in this particular community. But all of the questions that were asked, I did get answers from the principal as well as them relative to this item.
Will we provide them with confidential information?
No, ma'am, we do
for the
not.
after-school program?
No, ma'am, we do not.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Ms. Henry?
Ms. Hogan. I'm sorry, Ms. Hubbard.
Yes.
Ms. Hogan.
Yes.
Ms. Sonia.
Yes.
Ms. Val,
Yes.
Ms. Jones.
Yes.
Ms. Cousins.
No.
Mr. Davis.
No. The next item I do want to take separately is 12, 13, 22, 21. This is to approve the annual comprehensive financial report and compliance report that was the subject of our presentation tonight. Can we get a motion to approve 12, 13, 22, 21?
Motion to approve 12, 13, 22, 21.
Second.
Any discussion? Mrs. Henry?
Ms. Hubbard.
Yes.
Ms. Hogan.
Yes.
Ms. Sonia.
Yes.
Ms. Val,
Yes.
Ms. Jones? Yes. Ms. Cousins?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Motion passed.
The next item is the Confluence item 12-13-22-22 to approve and adopt a contract with Confluence Academy, Inc. to accept sponsorship oversight responsibilities for the remaining 4 years of its 5-year charter term with the Missouri Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, pending annual evaluation of performance at no cost to the district. Can we get a motion to approve 12-13-22-22?
I make a motion to approve 12-13-22-22.
Second. Any further discussion?
Yeah, I, kind of the second part of my question about the political impact is I want to make sure that we're not in a position where people will be punished if the privatization entities, the pro-private school entities decide to close the school or the group of charters specifically because it's now under SLPS sponsorship. That would leave us also in the position of doing a disservice to those families. So that was kind of why I was asking more about the climate and how the feedback has been. And I think somebody mentioned that they've heard from some legislators and it was a positive thing. So I'm just kind of hoping that, you know, the people who are usually against us might see this as part of a good faith effort as we're doing with the citywide plan.
I'm glad you asked that question because it does, I think, bear a conversation. I am a person of two minds. I think if all of you know me, you know when I ran, I'm not in favor of privatization by any stretch of the means. I'm not a big fan of charter schools, particularly given the history here in the city of St. Louis. It's been a very rocky ride and it has devastated the education landscape. But also, since I've been here, I feel like we have been working very hard to try to work in the best interest of children. Now, I am with Donna 100% when we are out fighting to protect this school district. So again, I'm of two minds. I think that this is in the best interest of our school district, first and foremost. I think that the threat of another sponsor coming in to close these schools in a way that is damaging to this city is very real. And why do I think that? Well, just look at the past 20 years and look at the sponsors that currently exist. UMSL closed Arch last year. That was shortly after we closed Clay. There was no conversation. There was no concern for working together with this. Prior to that, Confluence was closed by the Charter School Commission. That was terrible for that neighborhood, for those students. And I recall it was very difficult for us to sort of track down those kids and give them an easy place to go. And we can go on and on and on and on and on. I think that this is an opportunity for us to work in partnership with an eager partner, a partner who has been working with us, and a partner I think that's most importantly shares our values. I mean, the funding sources, the governance entity that governs them, put that aside. You know, I am pro-democracy and I am pro-elected school boards and I am pro-public school districts being the exclusive public education entity in our city of St. Louis. I lost that battle 20 years ago and haven't won that battle yet. But with that being said, we have an obligation to those kids. And I know that the Confluence CEO, Dr. Carter Oliver, who's in my work group in the citywide plan, I've met with her and worked with her for 3 hours every month for the last 5 months, shares our values. We met with the two chairs of their board. They share our values. You can look at the demographics of their schools and where they're located. They share our values. You can look at the number of ELL kids that they educate. You can look at the special education kids that they educate. They share our values. You can look at other charter schools. They have no special ed kids. They have no ELL kids. They have no homeless kids. They're majority, if not almost 90% white. They have exclusionary practices where they only take people from certain zip codes. They do not share our values. So that would be a bridge too far in my mind. But in terms of this, if it is true, based on the 10, 15-year history of the sponsorship of Confluence and the scrutiny that they've been given by the state board, that there is inevitable that some or all of their schools will be closed. And if that is a decision in 4 years that we're going to have to put forward to the state board, I think that we give those kids a soft landing. I think that we also ensure that the district has a soft landing for 2,400 kids suddenly coming on into our direct care. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's my opinion on the political ramifications. And kind of going back to what Ms. Saunier and Ms. Hogan said, if you start with the kids and what's best for them, us sponsoring Confluence is going to be in the best interest of these kids over and above the other alternatives.
So that was kind of the reassurance I was looking for. I just want to make sure that as we fight all of these legislative battles year after year, St. Louis City is singled out, Kansas City is singled out because, you know, we have the most Black kids and they're the easiest targets. So I want to make sure that that this is the right decision. I think that what you clarified there has kind of reassured me there that when we have more control over this process, it's much better than someone else who may step in to sponsor with the intention of letting it fail. So thank you for that kind of the political background.
I have a question / comment for Ms. Cousins. We have the citywide plan, and I feel like we talked about it a little bit, but I mean, I think it's really, really important as somebody that has been, you know, we've been a part of this since the beginning. I've been at the table. I've gotten to know Dr. Oliver Candace very, very well as being a part of the process. And a large part of what we asked when we said, hey, don't open up any more schools, is we said, let us come up with a comprehensive strategic plan. Let us get people that traditionally have not been in rooms together to have a joint conversation about what is best for all kids. And I think the decision that we're making today is, I mean, I've never seen an example of where we're in conversation. We usually have to deal with these things after they happen. The two entities are not talking to each other. They're not in conversation. So I would just like to hear Ms. Cousins, since you're the chair, and I know that I've seen as the vice chair how hard you work at the citywide plan. Can you just connect some of those dots and how you feel that sponsoring or not sponsoring Confluence ties to the goals of the citywide plan?
Thank you, Ms. Saunier. It only makes sense. What she said, we've been working for the past 6 months, trying to address all the concerns that we see that are occurring with all of our students in the city of St. Louis. If we do not lean in and support what we're trying to do here, the biggest fear that I have is what we're constantly dealing with every day. Dr. Candace Oliver actually came and she was a part of when the gun violence was occurring. Confluence was right there at the table, working, coming up with PSAs as to how do we address the effect of this violence in our kids. It wasn't for St. Louis public school kids. It wasn't for Confluence kids. It was for the kids, period. So the process of what we've been doing, and you said it perfectly, Ms. Saunier, to say, this has always been us against them. It's always been no one is talking, no one is working, and we've had the opportunity to actually do that. We're sitting here, we're talking, we're saying, how do we make this city better when it comes to educating our kids? So I think it only makes sense what we're trying to do. We have to get out of the them against us. And to be honest with you, in regards to the question Ms. Val asked, I think it puts it perfectly. Politically, yeah, we're going to have those that don't want us to do this, because guess what? They're the ones that want to take over Confluence, and they're the ones that want to shut down the Confluences that they don't feel the kids can do anything for them. That's where the difference comes in. So that's where my stand is in regards to that.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? Ms. Henry.
Ms. Hubbard,
Yes.
Ms. Hogan.
Yes.
Ms. Saunier.
Yes.
Ms. Miles.
Yes.
Ms. Jones.
No.
Ms. Cousins.
Yes.
Mr. Davis.
Yes.
Motion passed.
We now have many new items. I would like, if possible, to take them together as much as possible. But I do want to give everyone a chance to take a look at them and see if there's any that you want to take separately.
I would like to take separate 12, 13, 22, 24.
Okay. Can we get a motion to approve 12, 13, 22, 23?
I move to approve consent agenda item 12, 13, 22, 23.
Second.
Any discussion? Mrs. Henry?
Ms. Hubbard,
Yes.
Ms. Hogan.
Yes.
Ms. Sonier.
Yes.
Ms. Powell,
Yes.
Ms. Jones.
Yes.
Ms. Cousins.
Yes.
Mr. Davis.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Can we get a motion to approve 12, 13, 22, 24?
Motion to approve 12, 22, 23, 24.
Second.
Any discussion?
I just wanted to bring attention. One of the things that we as board members really have discussed as well to the superintendent and the interim superintendent is ensuring that we have things in place to support the safety of our district as a whole. And this procedure, this program that we're going to be introducing, that I really don't want to go much into detail about, because of the nature of what it consists of. But when we're dealing with crisis, one of the biggest challenges that we see is the lack of communication across the board for all entities. Unfortunately, we were dealt one of the worst experience that I, would not ask for anybody to have to deal with. But this particular piece is really part of the puzzle that I think we need in regards to whatever 911 challenges, whatever crises of any kind that may occur within this district. This entity will lean and provide support to the district as a whole.
Thank you, Ms. Cousins. Ms. Henry?
Ms. Hubbard,
Yes.
Ms. Hogan.
Yes.
Ms. Sonier.
Yes.
Ms. Powell.
Yes.
Ms. Jones.
Yes.
Ms. Cousins.
Yes.
Mr. Davis.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Other items to take separately. I'd like to take 12, 13, 22, 27 separately. So if we could have a motion for 12, 13, 22, 25 through 12, 13, 22, 26.
Motion to approve 12, 13, 22, 25 through 12, 13, 22, 26.
Second.
Ms. Henry?
Ms. Hubbard,
Yes.
Ms. Hogan.
Yes.
Ms. Sonier.
Yes.
Ms. Powell,
Yes.
Ms. Jones.
Yes.
Ms. Cousins.
Yes.
Mr. Davis.
Yes.
Motion passed.
I'll move to approve 12, 13, 22, 27.
Second.
I emailed Dr. Adams. I don't know if Mr. Watson's here to explain or if you have further explanation about this item because it was confusing to me.
And Mr. Watson, come forward in case I miss anything. On February the 8th, 2022, the board approved a Frable agreement and put $150,000 aside to support the Frable project, which was the landscape project in the back of the yard, basically, and the green space, if you will. And so, long story short, the board approved that. We have partners that are covering the cost of almost $1 million, and the board put in $150,000. What we did not do is indicate what the amount would be for this architect who is doing the design for the project. We received the bill for that, or the billing for that, which is about $285,000. And so we attached, because they're the only architect or firm that we have right now, and they are covering the cost of $285,000 for that project. We added another $50,000 to do the redesign work for CVPA. And so that's why you're getting this all together, because we did not put an amount in place for the work at Frable, because we didn't know it at the time, because they were doing the work. We put $150,000 aside for that. The board approved that in February. So the board has already approved that this entity doing the work already. Funding will cover the additional amount for Frable, but what I'm basically asking the board to do is to approve the $50,000 for the CSMB architect work, and the 285, 265, which one? 285 for the work that you've already approved, but we did not say what the amount was because we didn't know what that amount was at the time. And we're covering only 150. The partners are covering the difference between the 150 and the 285.
So of the 285 we are approving, we're going to get reimbursed by the partners, the 135,000 difference.
Yes, that is correct. Yes, we talked about today after our conversation. The answer is yes.
Okay,
And we have documentation already for that amount right now.
okay. And so I just want to be clear. So $552,000 of this project is from the MSD grant.
That is correct.
And I wasn't here on the board. I know this project has been going on for a couple of years. And so it's a little over budget and behind schedule, to say the least. Was it anticipated when we received that grant that it was going to be another, million or $700,000 more?
So from initial conversations, when we started this project, and we did get somewhat of a cost estimate from all the architectural firms, we did know that this project, the Frable Green Space Project, would be over $1 million. So what different organizations such as the Nature Conservancy, the Missouri Department of Conservation, they have willingly met with different organizations and group from the Dutchtown South community to raise the additional funds to support this green space project over at Frable. So currently, I think they have over $500,000 of dollars towards this particular project, which should cover those costs for the architectural firm.
So, okay. So just for clarity's sake, I would like to make, I can just make an amendment. So I'd like to make an amendment.
Can I ask a question before you make it? I'm curious on the 50,000. We're saying, and this is what you're asking to be separate out, correct?
I think Mr. Davis is going to make an amendment such that it's clearer for the board to understand.
Right, because I think my question as he do that is, I'm trying to make sure I understand in regards to Central VPA and the other school and the architectural. Was this, or were we told that someone will be donating the services to provide the architectural drawings, or is that going to be a cost that we're accruing?
So the donations were coming for doors and labor and other kinds of things, but never for the architectural work.
Okay, and then my other question before you do that, I'm just curious, has any construction started at all for Frable?
So we have not broke ground yet at Frable. They just finished the design pretty much at 100% now. So we're looking to break ground sometime in the spring, hopefully March 2023 to break ground.
I do have a question, please. I remember when this project was introduced, and I was really disappointed because Metropolitan Sewer District, it started off as a grant. We started off saying $150,000 for this project at Frable. And I asked, what about schools like Herzog that have tons of asphalt in the front of it? And then you have Nance over there. They don't even have their playground equipment that they've sent out for a whole year ago. It's still burnt up or whatever it was. I'm just, it's almost insulting to me to continue to put almost $1 million over here at Frable and then ignore the schools that really desperately need something done to their schoolyard. I think it's shameful almost. What in the world are you doing over there for this amount of money on that schoolyard? That couldn't have been done. You could have done something at Herzog as well. There's no school in North St. Louis that you've done anything like that to. I'm not just pointing to you, but I'm just asking, why hasn't this district considered that? This is a lot of money for a Metropolitan Sewer District project that started off free.
In response to that, Dr. Jones, so Ms. Jones, one of the things that we did initially with the Frable project, and again, this was a project that initially with the 552,000, it did go over what MSD has provided. Since we've been in contact and since this project is starting to go underway, MSD has committed to the district to do other facilities. So what I can provide to the board, to Dr. Adams, to Dr. Williams, are those priorities, which include a lot of those north side buildings because they do have a lot of asphalt. So what we asked MSD to do was do some type of study in terms of the lot size or the acreage to support another project like this. So the plan is, at least for now, that we will expand this project and it will include a lot of more north side schools such as Herzog, Lexington, And I believe Nance were the top 3 schools outside of this initial project at Frayville.
Thank you.
Out of curiosity, what made MSD go into this, into this grant? Like, is it an environmental thing? Is it, I'm just curious.
It's runoff. It's the water runoff, and the idea of landscaping these buildings reduce the water flow in neighborhoods.
To prevent
flooding.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
And Frayville was chosen because the neighborhood group sort of organized.
That is correct.
Put in for the grant.
They advocated for the last 2 years, quite frankly. Yes.
So this wasn't us, the
No.
district saying we're
No.
gonna go to Frayville.
No.
This was the community group saying we can get you $552,000 and maybe another 500,000 to do this.
Yes, sir. That is 100% correct.
And it's just taken 3 years.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Pandemic has something to do with it, but yes, sir, that's correct.
So I would just hope, I mean, I think.
Jones is 100%
the
correct.
green schoolyards are great, but I'm not sure about the process that has been done on this one. So if we can improve that and still get MSD's money, I think that would be helpful.
I do have one last question. What are they putting down for that amount of money on the schoolyard? If it's an outside project, is it a bunch of rocks or plants? Because I've tried to fill one out for my own home and I see the guidelines for it. So I'm just wondering, what is it that they're doing? What kind is it? Are they making creating a whole new building? Or is it just vegetation? Or I don't understand.
And I'll provide more of the details in regards to the design that'll really kind of answer a lot of questions. But just in general, it is more, I guess, the outdoors play, the outdoors field, so that the students, scholars can and should be able to learn about how native plants particularly grow. They will be able to, and it's incorporated with the academic piece, meaning that with these outdoor plays, with these outdoor landscapes that they're planning and projecting to put into these spaces, the scholars will be able to observe from year to year over a 3-year period in which MSD and some of these other organizations are committed to really provide them that hands-on experience to learn about plants, learn about vegetation, learn about just the different experience that you wouldn't get in an urban setting.
Is that just for Frayville School students?
It's for the community, but the Frayville students and staff did have some input, the school principal leader as well. They did have input in regards to what they wanted to see in this outdoor space.
So Ms. Henry and I are debating Robert's Rules of Order on via text. But I'm gonna go with my way, and if you two want to overrule me, let me know. But I think we can make an amendment, vote on the amendment, then we vote on the original motion as amended. Okay, so I'm going to make an amendment. I'm going to offer an amendment. Let me work on this wording. I'm going to offer an amendment to 12-13-22-27 to add a statement that of the $335,000, $285,000 is for Frayville, which will consist of district funds of no more than $150,000. The remainder will be reimbursed by other partners, and $50,000 for Central Visual and Performing Arts.
Second.
Right, so we are voting on the amendment first. Mrs. Henry.
Ms. Hubbard,
And for the amendment?
Ms. Hogan,
Yes.
Ms. Sonia,
Yes.
Ms. Fowl,
Yes.
Ms. Jones,
Yes.
Ms. Cousins,
Yes.
Mr. Davis,
Yes.
motion passed.
So now we will vote. We will return to the motion on the table as amended. Any discussion? Mrs. Henry.
Ms. Hubbard,
Yes.
Ms. Hogan,
Yes.
Ms. Sonia,
Yes.
Ms. Fowl,
Yes.
Ms. Jones.
Yes.
Ms. Cousins.
Yes.
Mr. Davis.
Yes,
Motion passed.
thank you. Teamwork makes the dream work, right, Dr. Williams? Are there any further items on the rest of the consent agenda? Any members would like to take separate? Yes. Ms.
I'm sorry, but 12, 13, 22, and 30, and 12, 13, 22, and 31.
Okay, so can we get a motion to approve 12/13/22/28 through 12/13/22/29.
Motion to approve 12/13/22/28 and 12/13/22/29.
Second.
Any discussion? Mrs. Henry?
Ms. Hubbard,
Yes.
Ms. Hogan,
Yes.
Ms. Sonier,
Yes.
Ms. Fowl,
Yes.
Ms. Jones.
Yes.
Ms. Cousins,
Yes.
Mr. Davis.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Can we get a motion to approve 12/13/22/30 and 12/13/22/31?
Motion to approve 12/13/22/30 and 12/13/22/31. Or wait, no, we're taking them separately. So just 30.
We can,
You want to do, okay, and 31.
second. Discussion, Ms. Hubbard.
I just would like to hear why we're doing contracts with two different universities to do education certification. Are they not both capable of doing that work, or I want to know why.
So they're for two different programs. This one's for the gifted certification for teachers that continue coursework. And then the second one is providing training for reading certification for teachers. So I'm assuming that they both come from two programs. Is that right, Dr. Adams?
100% correct.
Yeah, I know they're two different things, but does UMSL not provide gifted teaching? I mean, teaching for gifted teachers?
A lot depends, and I don't have the details, Mr. Burton. A lot depends upon the university cost, and so we send out to find out who has the best cost and can also provide services in our school buildings. And so a lot of factors go into why we go with one university as opposed to another one. I can get you the background details. Basically, these are funds that come from Paulson Bloyd that we have a deadline to get the board to approve by December 31st. But I can easily get you the information why Linda went for this one and why the reading program. We've been using the reading program for the last 5 or 6 or 7 years. And they have done an excellent job in terms of coming here to provide instruction as well as going to school sites to do it as well.
Have our reading scores gone up?
This is, yes, the answer to the question is yes, but it's also about teachers. Paulson Bloyd allows teachers to get certifications in whatever they want to get certifications in. So they may not necessarily be a reading teacher, but that's what they want to go back to get a degree in. And we have, every teacher after 1 year has the ability to spend up to about $32,000 for advanced degrees.
Okay, thank you. I would love that information.
Yes, I
but
can get that
that's all.
information to you.
That goes through an RFP process, right?
Yes, ma'am. Normally it goes through an RFP process. Yes, ma'am.
Dr. Evans, I have one last question. So after they complete this. Oh, I'm so sorry. Are they obligated, do they have to make a commitment to the district after this, receiving these funds?
That's an excellent question. We have fought that for 14 years. We can't legally obligate them to do so. We've talked to our lawyer and also the lawyer for Paulson Bloyd, that we can't obligate them to do that. No, we cannot.
Mrs. Henry?
Ms. Hubbard,
Yes.
Ms. Hogan,
Yes.
Ms. Sonier,
Yes.
Ms. Fowl,
Yes.
Ms. Jones,
Yes.
Ms. Cousins,
Yes.
Mr. Davis.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Final 3 items. Any board members take separate? Could we get a motion for 12/13/22/32 through 12/13/22/34?
Motion to approve 12/13/22/32 through 12/13/22/34.
Second.
Mrs. Henry?
Ms. Hubbard,
Yes.
Ms. Hogan.
Yes.
Ms. Sonier.
Yes.
Ms. Fowl,
Yes.
Ms. Jones.
Yes.
Ms. Cousins,
I had a question, but yes.
Mr. Davis.
Yes.
Motion passed.
That concludes the consent agenda. Good job, everybody. I pause. Okay. We now move on to board member reports. Looking down this way, any board member or committee reports down the line?
Can I just say big thanks to all the performance teachers who are doing winter concerts. I missed my son's band concert, but I got to go to my daughter's choir concert, and that was at one school, but I'm sure all over the district, they've been working really hard to make those happen. And I cried at the choir concert, so I'm thankful for all their work.
The equity committee met last week. I just want to continue to say that the district leaders, spearheaded by Dr. Williams, are doing an amazing job as we continue to put together the district equities plan.
The budget committee
had a meeting, or budget committee, Prop S committee, whatever you want to call it. We had a meeting, was it last week?
Yes.
I'm sorry, my days are just blurring
Last
together.
Tuesday.
Okay, yes, last Tuesday. It went really, really well. If you have any questions about some of the plans and some of the thinkings for the fund for Prop S, or questions about the differences between the way those funds can be allocated versus the way ARPA funds can be allocated, or, you know, commonalities or any information like that, I would definitely encourage you to go see that presentation that is on the website, or to go and, you know, watch the meeting. Thank you so much to all of it was a nice group of, you know, community leaders who were present, as well as some school officials. And Matt, you did a good job introducing everybody. Oh, and thank you to Mr. Watson. I'm so sorry, obviously, because you did so much work. You prepared the presentation. Yes, so great job to you as well.
None at this time.
The Land Realization Authority usually would meet tomorrow, but the meeting has been rescheduled for the 16th at 9:30 instead of 8:30 in the morning. So that is available for the public to view via online, and I believe they will be resuming in-person meetings after the beginning of the year. Secondly, there should be a lot of parades and balloons and cupcakes right now, but because Dr. Adams is a very modest person, very humble, we will let him go out quietly. But I would like to acknowledge this is his last meeting and thank him for all of the work he's done. St. Louis City loves you, and we would love to celebrate you.
The last legislative meeting prior to the start of the legislative session will be held on the 20th of this month. It will be held via Zoom. It will consist primarily of Mr. Carroll, our lobbyist, giving us a preview of what is to come in the next legislative session. As of a week and a half ago, when I spoke to him, there have been over 100 bills filed in the legislature that are solely dedicated to education. They were hard pressed to find one that was good. So we know that there will be more. Also, there has been just simply millions and millions of dollars pouring in to the various PACs who've supported legislators who will be sponsoring these bills from out of town privatization interests. So we look forward to Mr. Carroll for a very frightening but honest and discussion on the 20th. I do want to give a brief update on the superintendent search. I spoke with Dr. Hall of Rain Associates, who's our primary consultant here in St. Louis earlier today. The application for the superintendent closes on the 30th. It was originally the 18th. They pushed it back because they paused advertisements for 2 weeks. They've so far gotten a very good response. The process then will be once that application closes, the firm will do their due diligence, including background checks, initial interviews, and put together an application package for the board to review. We'll review that in closed session on January 13th. We will select a number of candidates to be interviewed virtually on the 19th and the 20th in a closed session. And then after that, we will come down to our final candidates who will be invited to come to St. Louis for site visits and the rest. And that is still on track to be around the end of January, early February. Finally, as Natalie said, this is Dr. Adams' final meeting. And he has fought off numerous galas, parties, parades, proclamations. Ms. Bell has been an assassin going through this building, making sure that any rumors were squashed. So I'm not going to give any sappy speeches, but I do want to just take a moment to also, as we end the 2021 fiscal year, read from our very excellently well done by Ms. Banks and the audit team, some of the summary of accomplishments and significant events of the last year. And they are reading through this. I'm like, wow, we've been busy, and it's just been this year. And I can't imagine what all the other years were. Starts off with vaccine clinics. that we received awards for the healthiest schools. Legislative action in 2021, the Board of Education launched its ad hoc advocacy and legislative committee. The committee met monthly and created 3 major priorities: protecting local funding, providing trauma, providing support for the unhoused. The highlight of the season was the successful defeat of House Bill 1552, which threatened to remove $18 million from the district budget to give to area charter schools. The outcome, fueled by the Board of Education and a grassroots parent campaign, proved to be advantageous to both. The next one was the Board of Education's ad hoc committee for citywide plan for education is gaining traction. We had a Mo Teacher of the Year finalist, Ms. Dowling, who is now a teacher at CSMB. We managed pandemic relief, 10.7 million in CARES Act money through a allocation of 46 and 103.3 million for the ARPA. I should say that the auditors were incredibly impressed with our handling through the finance department, and Dr. Adams no doubt had a big part in that, of managing the distribution of those funds. And they articulated how difficult it is and has been for school districts to do that. And we're very complimentary of not only doing that, but also coming up with an incredibly clean audit for complicated finances with everything else. So kudos to Dr. Adams on that. It goes on and on and on. We also had historic pay raises in January. AFT St. Louis Local 420 reached an agreement with the district that included a 3-tiered compensation package, making us the second highest starting pay for districts in the area. My personal favorite, Prop S, no tax increase bond issue. In the spring, summer of 2022, the district mounted a campaign to pass a no tax increase bond issue. The measure passed by a record 87%. Educators for Gun Safety, ARPA funds distribution ongoing, a new literacy program, transitioning a high school to a middle school, Alliance for Healthier Green schools, new bus company on board. It just goes on and on and on. So that's how I'm going to celebrate Dr. Adams with talking about the business that we've accomplished. And with that, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Come on.
Ms. Hubbard,
Yes.
Ms. Hogan,
Yes.
Ms. Sonia,
Yes.
Ms. Bob.